This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Express. This is indeed Gary Allen with you. Tonight we have a very good guest with us tonight, Brian Bradley. He'll be joining us very shortly. Brian is a comedian, actor, Broadway performer, and just all-around really great guy. And he's going to be joining us very shortly. For those of you that want to keep up with me on Facebook, it's go to Gary Allen, or on Twitter, it's at capital G, rest small letters, G-A, The Express, as well as you can go to know me and meetgaryallen.com. So I hope everybody out there is had a great week since the last time we spoke. As I said, my guest tonight is Mr. Brian Bradley. And Brian, I know you're out there. Brian, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Gary. How are you?
I can't complain, and before I go very far, if anybody has any questions tonight for Brian or myself, please feel free to get in the chat room and let EW know. EW will convey that message on to all of us, and I thank all of you out there for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us as I do Brian, my guest for tonight, and we're certainly happy. And Randy, I just want to say a special hello to you out there. You've been a listener of mine for a number of years, and I really appreciate that along with everyone else. Brian, it's we're almost a few days away from Halloween. Have you decided what costume you're going to wear this year?
No, homie, don't play Halloween. I spend my life in costumes and stuff. You know, you do that for a living. It seems I did it a couple times. You know what? I did it a couple times when I lived in California, and by the second hour, you know, you'd like, get this crap off of me. This wig is touching my face. You know, these weird, I hate gooey makeup. Nah, I'm sort of a Halloween Scrooge. Now I like sitting home. I actually get kids, you know. Yeah. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I having lived in L.A. and been an actor out there as well, and with the Groundlings, and of course since then on stage doing my Jay Leno thing as well as being a stand-up from time to time. If I don't have to put makeup on, I don't even wear cologne anymore. I don't want anything on my face. I know that
does wear cologne.
You know that I was thinking about this the other day. I was in a department store, and I was looking for a birthday gift for a friend of mine. Which, by the way, mine just passed. It wasn't a present for myself. But I was looking for a birthday gift for a friend of mine, a late gift. And I passed by all the cologne counters, and the men's counters used to be 2 and 3 counters, you know, in a store. Now there seems to be down to just one. I don't know. I guess women still wear cologne of some sort. I mean, it's good for them. But I don't know any guys that really wear it anymore. And you know, so maybe it's a disappearing art. Brian, you were born in.
So.
Yeah, I used to have 1,001 colognes, and frankly,
really?
after a while, I've got a few I think left in my cabinet here in my bathroom, but I haven't put on cologne in years. It's just, again, if you have the makeup on or you have a costume on, and when I always was on stage, I always had makeup on, you know, and no, thank you. Brian, you were born in Philadelphia, which is kind of interesting. I was born in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area, and I was reading an article just a couple of months ago. Do you know that there are more show business people and people in the broadcast industry that come from Pennsylvania as a whole?
Really? I would have guessed. I always hear Brooklyn and New Jersey.
Yeah, because that's where they end up going. Yeah. That's where they go to get their training, so they kind of latch on to New York City as their home city. It's like the two girls that are the stars of Two Broke Girls. They're both from Pennsylvania. My good friend Bob Saget from Pennsylvania. He's from Philadelphia, where you are.
Right.
You know, and although I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, so it was a whole different ball of wax, and I'm not far from that now because we both live here in Orlando, Florida. Brian, why comedy? And have you ever got a hold of the person that introduced you to comedy and just beat the crap out of him for it?
No one introduced me but myself. It's something I always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I remember as a little kid, I think my earliest memory was wanting to be a performer.
Right. Was there anybody who was a great influence on you with that? I mean, people on television?
I think as a kid, certain people on television, Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball and Dick Van Dyke, Don Knotts, they just made me want to be funny. They taught me how to be funny.
Yeah. And Harvey, not Harvey Korman, but
Tim Conway.
Tim Conway, yeah, who made Harvey. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with an uncle in the business, so I was surrounded by comedians all my life. Will Schreiner, who was on with us last week, who I know you know. Will also grew up in the business in a sense with his dad being a humorist and everything.
Right.
For me, having Tubby Boots as an uncle, my God, I got to meet every comic there ever was. And that wasn't my first choice, but, I've always wondered about comics because I have this theory, and I asked Will about it, that the great comics are born. Others can learn to be technicians at it. How do you feel about that?
I think I agree with you. I've seen comics, I'm sure you have, who start out and they're just dreadful.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Think,
I'm one of them.
Boy.
I'm one of them.
You go, man, you're never gonna get it. And then you see them a few years later, and you're like, wow, what happened to you? They got it.
Yeah.
But we all start out rough, Some people, I think I've read stories that Eddie Murphy had it from the get go.
Yeah.
He had a natural tendency to wow audiences,
Right.
But it's a learned craft. But then you have to be innately funny too.
Yes.
And I've seen guys who learn their craft and they write their material, but they're not innately funny. If somebody in the audience throws them a great line, they just shut up.
Yeah. They don't know what to do with it, and it's funny because I used to watch a gentleman who, excuse me, who you and I both knew, and he was very influential in my life getting with the Groundlings in Los Angeles, and that was Robin Williams. You could throw him any line, anytime, anywhere, on stage, off stage, and he could do a half hour on it. Yeah. And he wasn't he wasn't even a trained comic. He was a dramatic actor in New York.
Mm-hmm. As great as Richard Pryor was, he most of his material was written for him, and I saw him a few times at the Comedy Store working out material for one of the stand-up movies, and people would yell things at him, just I love you, Richard, and he would just look at him and go, shh.
Really?
He could not. No, he couldn't roll with it.
Oh, man. See, that's what the Groundlings taught me. I was able to start to be able to think on my feet quicker. Now, Bob Saget, who we both know, Bob is also like Robin. He has a quick mind. He can think real fast, and he has a comeback before you're even finished with your sentence.
He's awesome. Early on, I found myself in San Francisco bumming around with Bob Saget and Carrie Snow. And it was the funniest night of my life. I just sat back and watched those two rip each other apart, and it was just one line after another, and one topping the other, and I thought, I can't keep up. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this. It's amazing.
Will said something about Bob last week that I think is pretty true about people like Bob and Robin and Jonathan Winters. Although in Bob's case, it's kind of on the crude side, but a lot of great comics don't have a filter. It's whatever's there, it comes out, and somehow it's funny. I mean, I saw him many times at the Comedy Store, and then when we were at the Groundlings together, he was funnier than anybody I had seen in a long. I mean, this guy has more talent in his pinky than most people have running through their whole body. And that's a whole group of comics that you and I probably both know if we sat down and talked about it. Brian, what was it like for you to put together a solid 20? Because I know that's always the goal, is to get that first solid 20 minutes. How long did it take for you to kind of put that all together?
That's interesting that you say that, because I remember how terrifying 6 minutes seemed. Mitzi would want you to go up and do 6 minutes. I'm like, I don't. 6 just seemed like an eternity. Mm-hmm. And all of my material came out of improvisation. So I was lucky enough to MC a lot of the nights at the Comedy Store, and I would just work the crowd between acts, and then, you know, things would just come out, and I would go, that's a bit. Yeah. You know, somebody write that down. Quick, jot that on a napkin. I think I just wrote a joke. So 90% of any material I've ever come up with has come up, you know, spontaneously on stage. And like you said, on stage I have no filter, and I've often said things I cannot believe I got away with to begin with. Mm-hmm. And I have this ability to get away with saying things to people and have them laugh and not, you know, punch me in the face.
Right.
But I've often said things like, "Who said that? I want to know who said that. Who channeled that through me? I demand to know right now." You know. Yeah. Because I don't know where this stuff comes out of.
Sometimes in desperation, the mind works in funny ways. Well,
I don't know if it's desperation. It's just the act of being on stage. I'm sure you've experienced this. You're the most present on stage than you are any other hour of the day.
Yes.
You know, and any other hour, the rest of the hours of the day, you know, little radio stations playing in your head, or somebody's blabbering on about you or to you, and inside you want to go, stop talking. It's not interesting. You just want to go, hey, time out. Edit. Your story is really boring. Yeah. But that's when you have a filter, when you're off stage and you're polite and you just sort of nod or, you know, feign interest. You know,
you smile.
They had their story of the week. I saw this child with a cold and they were playing with the coffee condiments. It's like, this is, I heard a woman tell this story in the veterinary office 3 times today while I was waiting. So I thought, this is your story of the week. That, you know.
And she told that story 3 times to 3 different people, and each time she was so ingratiated with her story, she loved it.
Oh, love talking about the germs and how sick the child was and why the father didn't take it away from her. And why do you think this is interesting? Why?
Yeah, I know.
This is your story. Oh, save it for the holidays. You've got a winner, sweetheart.
You know, and I think some of that probably stems from the fact something that was said to me a long, long time ago. I was sitting at a table at the Improv because I was more down at the Improv than I was at the Comedy Store, which brings up another question I'll ask you when I'm finished with this, is that we would all sit around at the Improv, and I think it was Leno that said it once. He said that we live for that hour to 2 hours that we're either on the air or behind a microphone. And most people's lives are extremely boring. And we look at life in a different way than they look at life. They're 9-to-5 people. They live a 9-to-5 life, and that's exciting to them. You, as comedians, whether you're a stand-up comic or a comedic actor, you look at life a lot different than most people do. You see things differently. You come at things differently. You approach conversations and relationships differently than non-show business people. Would you agree?
I would. I think because most comedians grew up as outcasts.
Yes.
We weren't included. I certainly was never included. So we learn to look at the life as observers. We're, you know, on the other side of the window watching. And so I think that's where we get our perspective, and we're not in the mix. Other people are in the mix and they're happily integrating and laughing and talking. But because I was never, you know, allowed in that world as a child, you know, I was the one who was never picked on a team. I didn't have any friends at school. I walked the track by myself, and, you know, it was, so was that your similar experience?
Well, I had an experience that, I was the fat little kid whose mom and dad were there and well appreciated in the community, but I wasn't picked for any teams. I wasn't a scholastic achiever, really. I wasn't an athlete, and I was just there. You know, I was just there. and I looked at life differently. I built model airplanes and read books about history and stayed home. And I wouldn't say I was a total loner, but I was kind of a loner and trying to be a smart ass in school, and it really didn't work. And like I said, I was a fat little dumpy kid who had acne problems left and right. And
oh man,
that's rough. Oh yeah. I remember I asked this one girl to go out once as senior in high school. Just one time, I asked this girl to go out, and she said, "Why would I go out with a fat slob like you?"
Oh my God! Wow.
And you want the other end of that story now?
Yeah.
The other end of that story is some years later when I was doing Hill Street Blues in St. Elsewhere, because of my relationship with Stephen Boschko, having been a teacher of mine at Carnegie Mellon, I came home to visit my mom and dad. And they were living in Hollywood, Florida, and we went out to eat. And the young lady, who was the head cheerleader, by the way, talk about gall on my part, asking the head cheerleader out, she came over to the table, and she was gushing all over. I didn't recognize her. It hadn't been that long since I was out of high school, but I still didn't recognize her, and my mind wasn't even thinking. I was there enjoying my parents. I was only there for a few days, and then I had to fly back to L.A., and she gave me her number and asked me to give her a call.
And?
Oh, I just said, no, I'm only in town for a couple of days, and I was married at the time, and I was no longer a fat little kid with acne. You know, I'd lost a lot of weight when I was in the military, and, you know, in Hollywood, you don't do TV and movies back in those days if you were really that chubby. So I really wasn't, although I have to fight it constantly. But nevertheless, yeah, I never saw her again, and I've never been to a high school reunion, so I don't care. But, yeah, that was the other flip side of that story, that she came at me. She was a waitress or hostess at the restaurant where we went. It was a Chinese restaurant where you find most Jews anyway. We're always at a Chinese place. By the way, Miss Vicky told me to tell you hello, Miss Rossman.
Uh-huh. Oh,
I
talk to her frequently.
I think she's...
a friend of mine had a... Go ahead.
No, go ahead, sir.
A friend of mine had a great line pertaining to that. He said, I went up and asked a girl to dance, and she said, why would I dance with you? And he said, hey, don't be so picky. I wasn't.
I like that.
Uh-huh.
I like that. It's like my good friend Mark Viola. The other day I called him up and I said, he said, oh, by the way, happy birthday, Gary. And I said, thank you. I said, by the way, do I look my age? He said, nah, you haven't looked that young in years. So
that's funny.
Listen, this is the question I wanted to ask you. This just came to mind while I was talking. Some people have asked me over the years, since I only performed a couple of times at the Comedy Store, and I was there in the late 70s, early 80s, but most of the time I spent at the Improv. One guy asked me this question once, and I've never really been able to answer it, and I didn't ask Will last week. Was there a difference in the comics that performed at the Comedy Store compared to the ones that went down the street to the Improv? Was there a different type of comic? Because I know Robin went to both places, so did Jay, etc. But there did seem to be some comics that were at the Improv, and there did seem to be some comics that were at the Comedy Store. Did you notice any difference, or am I just thinking out loud too much?
I don't think there was much of a difference. As a matter of fact, I was surprised when I went to the Improv a few times to see how many of the Comedy Store guys hung out at both clubs.
Mm-hmm.
I was always under this impression that you picked one camp or the other. And then, of course, there were rumors that Mitzi wouldn't give you time spots if she found out you were performing at the Improv and vice versa. And there was,
Right.
That little territorial war.
Right.
You know what? This goes back to me and my I don't fit in from a child thing. I always thought I wouldn't be accepted there.
Mm.
Ironically, because it's called the Improv, because I did improv, I wouldn't do material on stage, and I always perceived the Improv as a club that featured scripted monologists like Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Maher, etc.
Yeah.
I always thought they wouldn't embrace me.
No, just the opposite.
I know, it's all in my head.
I mean, I when I first came to town out there, I went to see Mitzi because Tubby knew her really well. And Sammy, I have a picture on my wall behind me here with Charlie Callis. when I was performing in Las Vegas. I have a beautiful picture of me and Sammy and Charlie. But no, Bud Friedman would be great. Mark Leno, who was the partner with Bud at the time, he might be a little bit of a crotchety person to deal with. But no, man, we had a lot of great comics. Now, Letterman, I don't think he ever performed at the Improv. I remember asking him once, and I don't think he ever performed at the Improv. I think he was strictly the Comedy Store and other places around town, which back then there were a lot of them. I don't know what there is now. But and, of course, I was up the street at the Groundlings. So, you know, I started out as an MC at the Improv, and you're right. You get to learn a great deal about yourself, and you're able to add on to your routine by being an MC. It's a great experience. When did you realize you were going to be able to at least make a living at being a comic?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, well, it's such a long time ago. I don't even remember how I pursued it, but I got, my first opening gig at Just for Laughs in Portland, Oregon. And there was some sort of affirmation about getting laughs out of town. And getting laughs in your home club in L.A. just felt like, that's where I perform. And right. Even though it was Portland and not L.A., it seemed like the big time. An actual comedy club with 3 featured comics. Yeah. And that sort of got the ball rolling. And, people start, as you're hanging around in condos, have you ever worked this club? Well, I'll call that guy. I'll drop your name for you, and et cetera, et cetera. And,
right.
It propelled rather quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. There were some great comics that were coming up at the time. They were far ahead of me when I initially started going. But I had a tough road. When Tubby Boots is your uncle, it's kind of tough to even compete with him because he was one of the best that Miami Beach ever had. Now you started doing some acting out in Los Angeles. Do you find comedians make good actors? I mean, today they do look for comedians in the sitcom situation, but back in the day, like at the Groundlings, they always wanted to get comedians who were just maybe getting started in the training program there before they got to be this lone wolf on stage, because comedians have a tendency to be alone. They work alone. They don't have to work off of anybody else. But do you find that that's changed over the last 20 years, that comedians are making better actors now than they ever did before?
Another good question, because you can pick and choose. I mean, Don Rickles is actually a very good actor. Mm-hmm. He's done some wonderful dramatic roles, and Jerry Lewis is a pretty good actor. Some guys you'd look at and you'd think, boy, he'd be great. And I don't want to mention any names, but and then they turned out they never got it. They were offered pilots, and they recast them. Some guys just don't have it, and then Roseanne can just walk on and be a natural, and some people just have that persona. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you that improv training and character training, like the Groundlings offers, produces a much more well-rounded. The people that came out of the Groundlings were remarkable. People like Phil Hartman, and
he was one of my instructors. Phil,
he was amazing.
Phil got a hold of me one day. He heard me doing some strange impersonations, and he started working with me. And this was when he was on his hiatus from Saturday Night Live, because he was from Los Angeles. And he worked with me for a while, teaching me how to do the impersonations, how to get going with them, what to look for, how to deal with because mine were basically real basic stuff. But yeah, the Groundlings, we had a lot of fun. There was a lot of great talent around there. In my class was Costner and Bob Saget and Barbie Benton and Nick Turturro.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and you can see where I ended up. Speaking of great non-actors.
Well, you can start that list, too, of people that you worked with and people that had a TV series and then you never hear from them again. Or people who, it's amazing. It's amazing what paths it will take you on. This one guy, Dan McVicker, was just a big, gangly, goofball, Great Dane puppy. And not much of an improviser, and never did stand up. but he just loved performing and being out there. But as he matured, he became very, very good looking. And he wound up on The Bold and the Beautiful, playing this villainous character. And then he played Rock Hudson in a movie of the week. And The Bold and the Beautiful was the most popular TV series in Italy. It was like a nighttime drama in Italy. And he was huge in Italy. And he wound up moving there and remains there to this day. And I'm not quite exactly, even though we're Facebook friends, he's remained, made his living as an actor in Italy.
That's a beautiful country, that's for sure. I mean, yeah, and you know, it's funny because I have a number of friends of mine who are on the sister show of The Bold and the Beautiful, and that's The Young and the Restless. And I will often talk to them via Facebook or whether I'm actually on the phone with them. And they'll say, you'd be surprised of the actors that come and go and come and go. And some of them come here, they make some money, and then they realize L.A. is not for them. Show business really isn't for them, and they take their money and they go home. Nothing really happens to them. They just take up their bundle of cash and they go home. You know, show business, it's another thing I want to touch with you. You know, you and I saw it. You and I lived in L.A. at different times, but I know that when I got there, it was extremely tough. It's never been easy. Even with connections, it's never easy because the minute you walk through the door with a connection, you better be able to produce then, not an hour from now, but then. And I often remember Tony Gary, who was on the General Hospital. He came to the Improv a few times, and I remember him saying, the mistake that young people make when they come to L.A. is they think that they get their stuff together in L.A. You got to come to L.A. with at least something of an idea of what you want and some success at it, even if it's back home. He said the major mistake they make is by coming here and they don't have their act together. He said, I don't care if it's a comic or an actor or whatever. You better have your act together because you know this, Brian, L.A. will eat you alive in no time at all.
I think that's a very good point. And I was one of the people who showed up with nothing and no direction. Yeah. But what I did was just take as many classes and workshops as I could possibly find.
Right.
You know, and I regret not doing the Groundlings. I was already pretty well-trained improviser, and I was in the Comedy Store Players with a lot of Second City people, and Robin Williams was playing with us. Yeah. And I stopped by the Groundlings, and they insisted I begin at level 1. And it's like, oh, you know what? I did level 1 a really long time ago. I've explored my space, and but I know you got to start right at level 1. I went, no, it sounds like a money racket. Can't you just put me in a semi-advanced class? I mean, I've already achieved this, and I know this. But they went, nope. Start at ground 1, I should have done it anyway, but I took my little bloated ego and I went back to the Comedy Store.
Well, I'll tell you what. Nowadays, to even be with the Groundlings, you've already got to be an actor of some note to even get in to take the classes.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me forever to try to get in there. With one phone call from Robin Williams, and suddenly I was in the Groundlings school where I could move and perform and learn. That's what it took. And I'm talking late 70s when he came over to me one day when I'm having lunch, and Bud Friedman's sitting next to me, and he says, "What's up, Gary?" And I said, I'm kind of disappointed. And Bud says, "Oh, the Groundlings turned him down again." He said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Bud, can I only use your phone?" He came back 20 minutes later. He said, "Here, call this guy in the morning. You're going to start class next week."
Wow.
Yeah.
What a break.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of guy Robin Williams was. I mean, as you well know, you also worked with a friend of mine. Well, not a friend of mine. I've lost touch with her over the last 25 years. But a young lady who I used to work with somewhat on Hill Street Blues, and that was Betty Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
She's a great lady, isn't she?
Great. Yes.
And a great director.
I wondered what she was doing lately. When I was in New York, I was doing Grease in New York, and I got an audition for to play the role of David Letterman in that HBO movie about the late night wars.
Yes, and I can see why too. Yes.
And when I put on wireframe glasses and a double-breasted jacket and a New York Yankees cap, I mean, the resemblance to me was even striking.
Right.
And it's so funny. Betty wouldn't acknowledge that she remembered me. Maybe she just wanted to keep it professional. Mm-hmm. But I got 4 callbacks, but the other guy got it. That's kind of the story of my life.
Well, and here I sit. I look like Leno, except minus the chin. And, and I've known Jay for like 35 years. And by the way, that movie was so off base from the reality, the truth. I was discussing this off the air last week with Will, because we both know both David and Jay. It's funny. The critics really always disliked Jay, and yet he's a company guy. He'll do anything for you. He was like Robin. He's gracious. He's nice. He'll help you if he can. And David's just the opposite. He's a grumpy old guy who will help you. He'll help his friends. He has. But he's kind of aloof. He's like Carson. Carson was a very aloof person, not a snob, just quiet, and he keeps to himself. And people loved him in the business, whereas they disliked Jay. But the audience loved Jay because his ratings were always top notch, the best for late night. I never understood the critics' criticism of him. I really didn't. Let's talk about the Comedy Store Players, because you were there with Robin, Andy Garcia, Sam Kinison, Betty Thomas, and others. How did you get in there? And what did you learn by watching everybody else move?
Oh, man, I learned so much, because every Monday was group comedy night, and I was in a group with Andy and some other people, and we would go on earlier in the evening, and then the players would come on, and the room was packed by then, and Taylor Negron and Lucy Webb and John Bates and all these great people, and just I learned so much by watching. And over the course of a couple of years, they liked my work, and they asked me to be part of the group.
That's great. Did it help your stand up, as far as being able to think faster on your feet and to be able to mingle and deal with subject matter and situations that maybe prior to getting all that training you wouldn't have been able to handle?
Absolutely. Even the basic improv rule of saying yes and, that can take you down so many roads. And if somebody in the audience, they're not heckling, but they might yell something out, if you just shut it down, it's done. But if you say, yes, actually, I am a doctor,
yes,
or whatever, and then you've opened up a whole new thing. And I also find that when I play with the audience, I often assign people roles, and I give them characters, and they'll yes and it too.
Yes.
And there's one guy, a huge guy, it must have been, one of these giant, like Samoan-looking guys, and with a shaved head, and way too big for his chair, just a giant human being, and not obese, but just big, just, and I said, me mongo go, So as my set progressed, I went, by the way, dude, I'm sorry, what is your name? He goes, me mongo.
He bought it.
He bought it. And I went, bless your heart. And most people will play along with whatever role I assign them.
Which is what I hear, which is great. I mean, you'd get heckled out of the audience. I mean, I used to wear Hawaiian shirts a lot. I love Hawaiian shirts. And I used to get, where'd you get it? And I come up with one thing. Finally, one night I made a crude remark how I got a hold of it from Don Ho. So, and I'm not going to mention it here, but Vicky even laughs at that. Your comedy is the kind that breaks the fourth wall. You also, I'm told by Vicky now, and I'm also told by others, that no two shows of yours are alike, whether it's corporate, cruise ship, or otherwise. But talk about the differences in your act from working a cruise ship compared to a comedy club, or if you're working a corporate gig, because people out there may not understand that these are 3 different styles of comedy that have to be used. especially corporate, has got to be as clean as can be. And I guess the cruise ships have to be as well nowadays. I worked on a few ships too. But what's the difference when you prepare for all three? How do you prepare differently for all three of them?
Well, I definitely scan the audience. You know, you stand in the wings and you go, okay, this is what we got. Oh, you know, we got young people over there. We got some rednecks. We got a dating couple there. It's comedy club demographic is generally 25 to 50.
Right.
But they're there to see comedy. And if you're the headliner, you get a certain respect, and they give you certain cred right up front, and it's sort of no holds barred. Anything goes.
Mm-hmm.
And in a cruise ship, you got people wandering in going, is this the showroom? What's going to happen? Is it a magician?
Mm-hmm.
They see improv and they think it's impressionist. Oh, he does impressions, so, and they're older and they may have kids running around, and you really have to, you really kind of have to kiss up to them and be almost have to tell them what's going to happen and that they are going to have a good time. There are certain ways of doing that. You just can't walk out and start doing your set because they'll just stare at you.
Yes.
It has to be all about them and all about where they're from and how much fun they're having and how did you get here, and it's got to be their story. And then you can interweave material, but I find if you're going to win them over, it's got to be all about them.
Yeah,
they love it.
Yeah, yeah.
And when they realize, wow, this is all about us, he's not just standing there telling jokes, they become much more engaged, and they're kind of leaning forward like, is he going to talk to me? Because they're all having that vicarious experience through the person who's being spoken to. Because I don't insult them. The people I use, I usually wind up being the stars of the show because I bring them on stage for this silly improvised murder mystery at the end.
Yes, which I understand.
Stars.
Which I understand is hilarious from everything I'm told.
Generally is. And it's improvised, but there are set beats in it that, like a magician, I make the audience think that they're screwing with me, but I totally manipulated them into doing certain things. I make it seem like it's the first time it's ever happened.
Yeah.
And so they get a big kick out of that.
If I went into a comedy club and I wasn't sure of the audience, my first joke would be to gauge the audience, and right away I knew, okay, you can use this material tonight, you can use that material, and immediately I'm editing, I'm filtering, I'm doing in my mind, and I'm going forward on that. Is there such a thing, Brian, as an East Coast comic compared to a West Coast comic?
Gosh, I have not been on the road that long. In so long, I don't know. The LA comics these days, to me, the ones who are trying to be too hip for the room, and they call themselves alternative, and which is a really good excuse for saying I'm not funny. And if you don't think I'm funny, then you just don't get it. And, just going up with a sweater down around your knuckles and talking about your day it's not entertaining. You're not being funny.
Yeah.
These are broad generalizations, but I think a lot of the young comics that go out to LA, they want to just have a good 10 minutes that will get them a sitcom. And I think the New York comics take it more seriously as an art form. And then, of course, you have the San Francisco comics who think they invented it. And then you've got, Chicago improvisers who, I'm sure you've encountered that snobbery. Unless you've trained in Chicago, you simply don't know improv.
Yeah, I lived in Chicago for about 8 or 9 years, and so I would run across the people from Second City and everything there, and while a lot of great performers that come out of there, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. But, America has become so homogenized because people move around and are transferred. There used to be, you could categorize a Texas audience, but it's not that way anymore. You'd go into a Texas club in the late 80s, early 90s, and there were cowboy hats and big belt buckles and big hair, and and the audience would say, he's from L.A., and they'd go, boo, fag, and but it's just not like that anymore.
Yeah,
because everybody's from somewhere else, no matter where you go.
Yeah, we're all immigrants from somewhere. I know that you did something that I did. You took some time off to take care of members of your family, and it practically brought your career to an end with all your connections and everything else like that. And you spent 7 years at Disney Comedy Warehouse. How did that help you get back on your feet again in the comedy world? And, and thank you for the time you did spend taking care of your family, because I did that too. I took 10 years out of my life and just stopped everything to take care of my mom and dad. But how did the Disney Comedy Warehouse help you get back going and moving forward in what you love to do?
Well, actually, when I was doing Grease on Broadway, and the closing of that show almost to the day coincided with the day that my father could no longer drive because he had macular degeneration and he was homebound. So I moved home to take care of him, but I still managed to do road gigs, and I would set him up. I'd pre-package all of his meals, and I made sure a lady from the church came over, and a podiatrist and a neighbor, and I had them all set up, and I would go off and do a week, one of the Comedy Zone runs or something like that, or some corporate gigs. It was after he passed away that I sort of stuck here in Orlando now going, okay, well, now what am I going to do?
Right.
And this friend of mine suggested I audition at Disney, and actually, it was the least Disney gig on property. We had this beautiful theater with no costumes or name tags. They took us out shopping to buy our own clothes, and it was just pure improv. And they actually pushed us to be as edgy as we could without saying words that you can't say at Disney, which was a relief because you don't have to take disgusting suggestions from the audience. And if they yelled out something that was inappropriate, you'd go, hey, it's Disney. Think up here, pal.
Oh, boy, it's time for Wall.
Yeah, and then they'd smarten up.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. That was a great experience and a relief because I was off the road. I got to come home every night.
Yes.
And it was a comedy gig with health benefits and paid vacation and a pension fund. And it was an equity contract. So, it paid less than the road, but I'll take the pay cut to come home at night and have health benefits and a pension fund.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a lovely 7 years. It did nothing for my connections on the road, actually. Yeah. During that 7 years, the whole comedy scene changed and the way you got booked changed.
Yep. And
club owners changed. And, you used to be able to get on the phone and call a Funny Bone and say, what do you got? And book some dates.
Right.
But that's not how it works anymore.
No.
So when that closed, I was sort of left in an abyss. And I was like, geez, I don't really don't want to go back on the road. And I don't know how to do it anymore. The whole system changed. And so I kind of stumbled around for about 2 years doing nothing except hit or miss, a corporate gig or one-nighters and thinking, well, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with my life.
Right.
And out of the blue, this comic I've known for years, Bruce Smirnoff. You know Bruce?
Yes. Oh, God, yes. I haven't seen Bruce. God, the last time I saw Bruce, I was in L.A. No, it was in Chicago. He came there I can't remember the room he was at, but it was downtown, and he and I just had a few laughs, and then he had to go because he was flying out to go somewhere else Sunday morning.
You should interview him sometime because nobody has better show business stories than Bruce Murdoch.
I don't know how to get a hold of Bruce. I lost contact with him and a whole lot of people. If you got a contact, I'll get it to me.
Yeah, I will. Well, off the air, I'll give you his number because oh my God, his story. He has some of the most heartbreakingly hilarious stories of rejection in Hollywood, and giving Johnny Carson a ride home from the Improv one night because Carson was too drunk to drive.
Yeah,
and the whole way Carson telling him how unfunny he was.
Oh God, and that's
just,
yeah. Well,
the best stories.
Speaking of which, before we get too far, we got about 15 minutes left, but talk about your advice that you give to young people today who want to get involved either as a comedian or an actor, and also weave in there if you can how comedy has changed. Some of it I don't like. I don't like dirty comics. I don't mind a double entendre. I don't mind a little slap and tickle here and there. I just don't like every time you go into a comedy club and it's F this and F that. I just don't dig it. If you don't have any intelligence to be intelligent on stage and use your wit, don't go on stage is my opinion. I don't care how crude the audience is, but talk about the road, what you recommend and what you say to young people if they ask you for advice, and how comedy has changed and where you think it's going.
Oh gosh, I don't know where it's going. I've almost been, because like I said, Bruce called me out of the blue and said, "Why aren't you doing cruise ships?" And I said, because I forgot they were there.
Yeah, I
forgot it was an option. And so for the last, 5 or 6 years, I've been doing cruise ships, which is almost like being semi-retired. It's not the club circuit, and you're not around young comics, and you're not around anybody up and coming, or you're it. You're the only comic on the ship,
mm-hmm.
and it's great money, and a very lonely existence because you're by yourself, and people think, oh, that must be like an endless vacation.
No.
Well, if I had a lobotomy, it might seem that way. But it can also seem like, prison at sea.
Yes.
And, Groundhog's Day. Every day it's the same hallway, the same food, the same, every load of passengers looks the same, and I work 90 minutes a week, and what? I have a week to fill, but I should complain, right? It's still a great gig. So
hey, when I worked ships, it was not much better. It was this, and then everybody would come up to you if they know you were the comic. Hey, I got a joke for you. And the whole time I'm there, because I also worked on the cruise staff. Hey, I got a joke for you. Try this joke. Use this joke. And then when you didn't use it in your show, they come over and say, "Why didn't you use my joke? It's a funny joke." All the guys back at the club think it's funny. It's amazing.
I usually stop them and go, "Wait, is it racist? And is it long?" No, it's not that long. Is it a 3-part joke? Well, yeah, it's a 3-part joke. Does it involve maybe a black person or a Jewish? Yeah, well, but it's not racist. I go, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. They're not funny.
Yeah.
I said, give me a line. I don't care if it's stupid as a horse walks into the bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" That's all I need.
That's
short,
still a funny line.
Funny. No, yeah, it's a great joke. But I don't want to hear, a black guy and a Jew and a gay guy or a rowboat. And she says, no, already it's not funny. No. It's contrived and awful and racist. So I make them stop. I won't listen to them.
Right.
But
I do a joke.
Of young comics. Yeah. Go ahead. I don't hear
no. There was a joke that I use every once in a while, and young people today don't get it. I say, 2 Irishmen walk out of a bar. They don't get it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, young comics today, where do you think they're taking comedy?
I don't know. The few I've seen on YouTube, it seems like there's a race to be to push some edge that may or may not be there. They want to say something that's never been said before.
Right.
Instead of finding their own interesting perspective on the world, they want to be the one that, tip the cart with this incredibly offensive routine about fat people or Arabs or gays, and it's like, I'm going to really show them. I'm going to out Carlin, and it just comes off as, to me, it's not funny. It's just attempt to be gross and offensive.
Mm-hmm.
Although I saw some really promising comics on Last Comic Standing that were really good writers and had great personas, and they're out there. And then there's the ones that try to get headlines. Like there was one about a girl on YouTube some terribly unfunny rant about why she hates fat people, and she kept using the word fat. It's like, you're not funny, you're not entertaining, you're just a bitter little rich girl who needs to go away.
Yeah, I think that's always the case. By the way, say hello to Max and Murphy for me, will you please?
I'm my dogs. Of course I will.
Tell them I said hi. You were on Broadway in Greece. How did that come about? I mean, obviously an audition, but that has got to be, I tell you the truth, the worst part about the business was always going and auditioning for whether it's a commercial or a movie or whatever, because they'd always go, next, with me in particular. And then when Leno got popular, I was not getting cast in anything because I look like Leno no matter what.
Well, a quick story. I knew the director, which helped, but I still had to do a lot of work. And coincidentally, he was directing Tommy Tune in Tommy Tune's one-man show. And they were in Dallas the weekend I was doing a club in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought Tommy out. He was trying to sell Tommy on this idea about Vince Fontaine, the DJ, doing a half-hour sock hop before the curtain went up. And Tommy didn't get it. He didn't like it. He didn't understand it. So Jeff brought Tommy out to my second show at Hyenas, and he said, do me a favor, don't do any material. Just improvise your entire show. Work the crowd. I went, okay. And so that's what Tommy saw, and he got the concept. He went, oh, that could really work. We'll have Vince Fontaine on stage working the crowd, getting them into a frenzy and a sock hop. And so that got me the audition, and it was literally out of a movie because they by this time they were auditioning in an empty, unused Broadway theater. And there was literally, it's like they had the producers, Tommy Tune, and the director, these shadowy figures in the back, and a bare light bulb on a pole on stage. And I just walked up with my luggage from, what's not Grand Central, but anyway, the big bus station.
Yeah. I know what you're talking
in
about.
Times Square.
Right.
Yeah. And my luggage is in the hallway, and I just walked up, and I had just strung together all of the lines that Vince Fontaine had in the script, and they went, okay, thank you. And I got back on an airplane and flew to Nebraska to do a week in Omaha. And I thought, well, that's that. And at the end of the week, my friend Jeff called and he said, Brian, we saw so many people, and he was really playing this game. He goes, but you're going to Broadway.
That had to be good. That had to be cool because we do so many auditions. I know in L.A. I used to do so many auditions and everything. And then again, like I said, when Leno got to be popular, I was getting no more casting, even in Vegas where I lived for 10 years, because they'd all say, Gary, we love your enthusiasm. We know you can act, but I can't have Jay Leno in a commercial for one of my clients. So that kind of ended that for me nicely.
God.
It's a curse, Brian. It's just a cursing guy, I mean, you'd think Jay would give me a car over it, but he never did. With the couple of minutes we got left here, we got about 4 or 5 to go. What have you learned about yourself over the years in the business? that you could pass on to others, a good lesson you've either learned or something you've learned about yourself that you sit back and you say, damn, yeah, that's pretty darn good there, Brian?
No, that's a good question.
Well, that's why they pay me the big bucks.
Yeah. One of them is when, before you go on stage, and if you're feeling nervous and questioning yourself, you got to change that. And you have to summon this fake confidence. And you call it, people say fake it till you make it. But I also would, we all have bad days where you don't want to go to work. And
right.
Maybe you got a cold or you're not feeling so confident. And I would summon the muse, and the muse is I would model my energy and my enthusiasm based on entertained comics that have always influenced me. And I would think about, Robin Williams and his command of the stage,
mm-hmm.
and Carl LeBove and his amazing energy and his command of the stage. Mm-hmm. And even Judy Gold, who I don't get along with anymore, but the woman knows how to work a room.
Yes, she does.
And be very assertive. And I think, okay, I've been that. I've had that energy. I'm as good as those guys. They have influenced me. Be that tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And just, get out of your crappy self and, get into your performer head.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get off stage and go back to your room and have your flu or whatever. I literally had 100-degree fever and the flu, crawling to the showroom, and got up on stage, and it all went away, and I did my show, and I crawled back to my room.
Yeah, I was on stage with the flu a couple of times in my life, and I was sweating like I was in a shower, but the show has to go on. Did you ever
mm-hmm.
perform in Vegas when the boys used to run the room?
Who are the boys?
The guys, yeah, you know what I mean? Vinny and, where you.
No, I did the Comedy Store at the Dunes, and I did the Desert Inn with Diane Ford's show.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Aladdin with Grease. That's about it. Grease was on tour, and we did Las Vegas.
Well, back in the day
I never did the Vinny Bag of Donuts. I've heard about those guys.
Oh, yeah. They tell you, hey, kid, we want 20 minutes tonight. Not 19, not 21, not 20 and a half. 20 minutes, get off, get on, and et cetera. But what's next for you, Brian, in the couple minutes we got left?
Good question. Not quite sure. My cruise life has taken a hit because I had a medical emergency this year, and I had to cancel some dates with Holland America, and that's something that is verboten, no matter what the situation, and the woman who books that will not tolerate cancellations of any kind, even though I had completely lost the use of my left arm and didn't know if I was going to be paralyzed. I had to see it. I knew I had to see. I got to get an MRI. I've got to get surgery. I can't lift a fork. I was freaking out.
Right.
You're done. You're dead to me.
Yeah.
Never book you again.
Yeah, that's agents.
So I'm looking to expand that, and I'm also looking to expand some corporate. I do a lot of team building workshops with improvisation. And so I'm looking to expand that as well.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on The Express. You can get a hold of him at brianbradleycomedy.com. He's a very good friend of mine. He's also a good friend of my good friend, Vicky Rossman. He's one of the funniest men you're going to find on stage anywhere. Comedian, actor, Broadway performer, Brian Bradley. Brian, thank you so much for joining us on The Express and taking a few minutes out of your day for us. I
appreciate it, Gary. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. I'll talk to you in about 5 or 10 minutes, but good night for now. And I just want to remind everybody that we're going to have a great show. Great shows coming up for you. The show before Thanksgiving, I will not be on. And from the 15th of December until the beginning of next year, I will not be on as all because I'm going to be traveling quite a bit during the holiday season. And so we won't be having shows then. But I just want to thank everybody for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us on The Express. You can get a hold of me on Facebook at Gary Allen, A-L-A-N, Twitter, capital G, small a, The Express, or go to meetgaryallen.com. And on behalf of everybody who listens in, and Randy and everybody, thank you so much. EW back in the control room, thank you for all your help tonight. And until next week, folks, would you please do me a favor? Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and good night.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.